Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Or we can get gully, I'll size up your body and put some white chalk around it.
Welcome to the Single Dads of the Midwest, episode 30. And I'm joined by the terrific Tom Kusch to discuss a lot of different things. Essentially, the core philosophy being how to make people better than how we found them, as Tom would like to say. I'll let Tom introduce himself, but it is nice that we actually have someone from the Midwest area on the podcast, kind of representing the area. But without further ado, Tom, would you like to please introduce yourself?
I'm Tom. As you know, I am working to become a public speaker and just inspire people. Typically throughout the day, I just love to get people to interact and talk to each other, but I've lived many lives, done lots of different activities, and I've been using that knowledge to inspire and just make people realize that they're capable of anything I do too. And then more. Who knows who the next outrageous performer is going to be. That's the best part.
That's awesome. And before we get into our conversation, I also want to just give a thank you to Don/Sheldon again for bringing in another guest and uniting more people together. I like to constantly refer to Don, also known as Sheldon, as the man who single-handedly keeps this podcast alive. So thank you, Sheldon, for introducing us. So yeah, I know at the higher level, we definitely kind of both really believe in that philosophy of making the people around us better. And I know specifically one of the things you do is wearing costumes to the farmers market, I believe. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, when COVID started, or right before the lockdown started, just realized it's going to bring a lot of sadness because, people aren't talking, they're staying away from each other, a lot of fear. And there's a local farmers market near me, and I decided I was going to go up there in a weird outfit. I used to wear a crazy outfit whenever anything bad happened in the world. I would dress up really outrageous just to sort of break people out of that frame of sadness and fear. And so my driver's license for the state of Michigan actually has me in a Batman suit with the logo all over it. And it's got me out of tickets. It's also got me prompt service at the DMV. And just little things like that are what I usually do initially to really get people to break them out of whatever they're stuck in. And this slowly resulted in, I had an open invite to one of my friends from a circus class, and she decided to dress up too. And for the first probably 6 weeks, we would give each other a theme, only talk to each other on the day before on Saturday, and just show up at the market. So we never knew what the other one was going to wear. We never knew what to expect. And then the vendors would guide us towards each other, and it became a game. And then eventually it progressed into a relationship, and now we live together. And whenever we go up to the farmer's market now, it varies. We've worked for vendors now. We've gotten to know the staff. We've gotten to know all the people. We've done probably 30 or 40 different costumes and constantly coming up with more ideas. And it became a really interesting way of walking around the city afterwards. We would go to the little downtown strip and you would see people out to lunch. Some of them are so engrossed in their smartphone, they didn't even realize you're walking by them on a pair of stilts. And others are so excited about you. They just stop you and take pictures, and we get into conversations with people. We got to know so many of the random locals in the town. There's a few older gentlemen that just sort of wander around. And they live in a retiree center over there, but they're just walk the street during the day and they're sit and talk philosophy with you and life. And I just really enjoy this part. And then we started to get more and more gutsy. We started walking into different stores with stilts or skates or just a weird costume on. It now became a regular route where we had to stop in all these stores and say hi to all these people. And these people are from all walks of life. So some of them are LGBT people, some are devoted Catholics, some are different Middle Eastern, some are Asian, some are you name it. We meet everybody's there to cheer us on. They're just happy that we're doing something different. And when the lockdowns were really locked down, it was we would roller skate the city and go to the neighborhoods and go see the kids that put little jokes on the windows of their houses. They put in the window a joke of the day. And you can barely read it because it's written by probably a 6-year-old, but it's amazing. And they would watch us and we'd walk up and read it and then say it to each other. And you just see them in a window of just glee because someone saw their joke. And so that became one of our routes too. And this resulted in Saturdays being pretty much from about noon till dark. We would just explore the city and interact with people. And then as the city's reopened, it's just not the same. There's a lot more cars, so you don't really want to be in the streets and roller skates and whatnot. But we do make it to the market time to time. But my girlfriend, she actually works for one of the vendors, and she's been learning to garden and farm. And I've been out to his farm a few times, so we built that relationship. And it's just been like a ripple of relationships and friendships. And some of these other people checking in their text if they don't see or hear from me in like a couple of weeks, they'll see where I'm at, see what's going on, and just really built out some relationships and a sense of community. And it's just something I'm really pride myself on. And so there's other events in the market, like off hours, we'll go up there and go to the events, and usually the staff finds us first, or whoever finds each other first. It just becomes a game, and it's just so nice and it's so much fun. And I really need to get back out there. It's been about a couple months. I just got back from a road trip, so I haven't really had a chance to make it back to the market. But yeah.
Yeah, and we could talk about the road trip in a bit. I'm curious, how do you get the materials for the costumes and the stilts and stuff? I know you mentioned you had some circus background.
Yeah, so I'll back up a little bit further. I used to work for a law firm, and it was a very strict, like, you're constantly working, you barely got time off. You could go spend crazy amounts of money as long as work related. They took care of everything. They would take you anywhere you want to go, as long as the work got done. But you had no social life, no hobbies. And it took an aunt. I was made lunch plans with her and had to cancel and reschedule, kept pushing it back. And then ultimately what ends up happening is I push it back. I'm like, I'll call you Saturday morning. And I call Saturday morning, she doesn't answer. And I find out that evening she had a heart attack and that she was still alive, but she was in the hospital. And so I start driving to the hospital. My boss is calling me, asking me to get some work done. And I'm like, it's Saturday. I need to go to the hospital and take care of this. And they're like, you need to get your priorities straight. We need this done. And I'm like, that just made a decision for me right then and there. And I said some very choice words that I'm not going to put on this podcast, but we had a little bit of an argument. And slowly I made my way out of that life into healthcare and starting to have hobbies and stuff like that again. And eventually, first I ended up at a horse farm for a couple of years, learning, because I hated horses. I just thought that would be fun. Then I ended up as a roller derby referee. And in the roller derby, some of those people got me into the circus community. And so I learned to be an aerialist and play on a trapeze and aerial fabrics and hula hoops and stuff like that, and tons of overlap. And slowly I would pick a different apparatus every showcase to sort of force yourself to really get it into gear. And ultimately, that got me into learning a unicycle. I mean, there's so many different hats I could wear, but it just makes it a lot of fun.
No, for sure. I feel like I had a similar trajectory with Quidditch, where I moved to the Bay Area. Quidditch was one of the first things I joined. And then through Quidditch, that's how I did swing dancing and all these other activities that were all a result of like trying one thing and going all these other directions.
That sounds amazing. I've never tried Quidditch. I don't even know. What do you have to have a certain implement to play it?
It's super fun. Yeah. Well, usually there'll be teams that host practices, either like college teams or community teams. In California, there's a good amount, unsurprisingly, obviously harder. Usually when it comes to the Midwest, it's more done through the colleges, but there are some community teams.
Okay.
But yeah, it is pretty athletic. It's just like kind of any normal sport. There's obviously some quirky elements as we take inspirations from the Harry Potter books. So we run around on PVC pipes and things like that. But otherwise, you're taking a ball, you're throwing it through hoops, kind of similar to a lot of other sports. There's a dodgeball aspect too, because two people on each side, they're called the beaters. And so they use dodgeballs to try to get people out. So it's very hard to explain with just words. I feel like a visual representation is clearly the best way, but it is super, super fun.
That's awesome. I just love when people talk about doing fun things, because people forget to have fun as an adult and they wonder why they're so cranky all the time.
Yeah.
Or lost in their head. Like, can't take it too seriously. I mean, there's times you have to be serious, but there's also times you need to let go and play and remember how to laugh and just really enjoy life.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of where I could get textiles now if I ever want to do like a fun costume just for the kicks.
Oh yeah, most of the costume parts have been either thrift stores, estate sales. Like we had one of the thrift stores in the downtown area where we could walk in on stilts and they would save us stuff. And
Nice.
typically we got discounts and everything else, and we never asked for any of this, but they're just like, "Yeah, we love what you do, so here, have this entire outfit for like $10." And you're like, "Sure."
Great. Yeah.
And other times the estate sales, we actually walk. We would sometimes we would wear, like if it started raining, just leave your costume on and hop in the car and find an estate sale. And we walked into one of them, and as soon as we walked in, like, "You guys are the people from the farmers market." And we're like, "What?"
Have a reputation.
And turns out that one of the guys that I met at a different estate sale, like, was sharing pictures of us going around the markets, and so we ended up had a little fan base there, and it was just really cool.
Nice.
So whenever I see them, I always have to attack hug them when we can. But
That's
it's
great.
just so much fun. The best is when you see these people without a costume on, they have no idea who you are.
Yeah, they're so used to seeing you with the costume that, it seems like a whole different person without it.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, throughout the pandemic, I was acquiring basic pieces. Like, there's actually a place I bought a top hat from that's been in Detroit since I think the late 1800s.
Oh, wow.
And there was such a cool experience. I never thought I would ever have such a formal hat buying experience, but it was great. And just
How tall is the hat?
it's probably maybe just over 12, 14 inches, something like that. Not super
Okay.
tall. It's not, because otherwise you start taking yourself off with door
Yeah,
frames.
not a 10-gallon hat. For
Yeah,
sure.
no, that would be too much for me.
Although that would be a pretty fun thing to wear. I've
Well, I would
always wanted
too.
to get one of those kind of hats, but
I'm sure it'll
I've never
happen.
actually seen one in person.
We got to find you one. That would be awesome.
That would be fun.
I've made my own a couple times too, just getting there's
Really?
what do you call it? A craft foam. And then
Okay.
you can just mold it around your head, and then you can make it outrageous. And so there's a couple that I could show you once. I didn't even think of bringing any props.
Oh no, all good. I
Yeah,
mean, we'll just be taking the audio component, but it is good to obviously see the
yeah.
visuals for my own sake.
All right.
You mentioned when we talked last time, like you took a trip you alluded to, and I believe you bought a van, and it seems like you had some pretty transformative experiences on this
Yeah.
adventure.
So last May, right before my girlfriend and I moved in together, we were just talking, like, she's in a smaller condo and she's like, "Yeah, if you moved in, like, we need space and stuff." And logically, I'm like, "Well, I'm thinking about doing the van life thing." And so we joked about it. And then I hopped on some government auction sites and I found one up an hour and a half-ish north of here in one of the cities on the bay. And it's an old work van. It's like a plumbing van. This thing is rusted, and I mean, paint's missing. You can tell it really has never been cleaned and everything else. But the thing about the government vehicles, they run, and they will tell you if they need to be towed out. And so I knew it'd be, yeah, whatever, screw it. I'll put $1,600 on it and see what happens. Because most of these vans go for 3 to 8 grand for something that's about 15 years old. And this thing's an '07, so I wasn't expecting much. And then I get a email saying you won. And so we go pick it up and get in it, and the thing's filthy, and it just, there's strobe lights on the roof and on the sides and stickers and everything else. And so we get it home, and first step for the first while was just getting a mechanic sound. Like, I changed all the hoses and the belts and the brakes and tires and all that stuff. And mainly because if you're going to be on a long road trip, you don't want any of that to fail you. And ultimately, that got us to the point where we started making it into a project. So it was myself, my girlfriend, and her dad, and we would just spend Sundays working on the van. And eventually we got walls in, we got insulation, got a little solar panel, battery, a fan. And it's very basic. But as we progress, after spending some time in it, I realized what you really need and what you don't need. Like, I don't need to bring 20 books with me. I probably need to bring 5. Like, and just some of that stuff I just didn't really think through. And in some of it, on some of the desert roads, it just gets jostled around. And like a lot of the wood that was repurposed. Some of it didn't handle those roads very well, so they need to like tear it out because it was that particle board stuff. But ultimately, back to the healing. I got going. I'm just excited about the van.
No, yeah, it's fun to learn about. I've met a couple people that have done it. I've never done it myself, but like you said, it does seem like a lot of work in terms of going from what you get to something that's more usable for an actual trip.
Yeah. So when I left home with the van, it was like 3 degrees out, and I'm like, I'm absolutely insane. Where am I going to go? It's like my little heater buddy, which I mean, not ideal to run a propane heater in a vehicle, but I've had the fan on and it had a carbon dioxide detector and all the precautions I could take. And I did that for, I think, a night. And I was like, yep, this is not worth it. It's too hard to control the temperature. You got people driving around you. I'm like, I'll just get an Airbnb. And so I ended up at an Airbnb in Oklahoma that was a tree house. And I could check in. The backyard's very, how do you put it? Like very eccentric or whimsical, I guess would be the way to put it. Like it was like, how is this in a neighborhood? Like this is gorgeous. Everything, every little detail has just been taken care of. And I was talking to the Airbnb host, and she said her husband and her both lost their jobs. They're due to COVID, and that this Airbnb is how she makes her living. And it was one of those moments where I won a couple $100 at a casino where I camped in their RV parking, and something told me to save the money for somebody. And I realized it was for that lady. And so I left it on the nightstand for her, and she was so thankful. And then she told me she was actually van lifing when she was younger before the internet. And that's how she met her husband. He was a hitchhiker that she picked up, and they hit it off, and they've been married now for 25 years. And just
Amazing.
crazy stories. And every stop was like I'd meet somebody else that just some outrageous story like that. And then I ended up in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, which is sort of like a interesting city. The Rio Grande is there, and there's a hot spring, but the hot spring is actually plumbed, and it feeds into all the resorts and the campgrounds. And so the only stipulation is that hot spring water has to drain back to the Rio Grande. So there's a separate drainage system, but ultimately it resulted in a wonderful just like soak and getting to know other campers. And it was just people from all over the country. And then we had a couple coming from Germany that were just RVing across the US, and everybody was just so kind. And we sat around and talked, ages probably 21 to 75, and we just sat around a little fire and in and out of the tub and just talked everything, all the political topics you could think of. Nothing was taboo, and there was no judgments. There was just good conversation and people sharing their life experiences. And almost all of us walked away seeing the world differently, because there was somebody there you would agree with, but there's also somebody there you would definitely disagree with. And that was my favorite thing. But yeah, ultimately, I could go on for a while on this, but the largest win was I spent 2 weeks in solitude in the desert, and it was a bit rough at times. I mean, basically, just no technology and minimalize like being on anything like a phone or anything, because you don't want to escape. And that allows so much to come to the surface and just release. And that was based off of a book by David Hawkins that I recommended to you last time we talked, but called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. And it was just a couple times where I just have downloads of information just come in and other things leave. And then the entire world's so different right now. I'm like lost in a love and gratitude where I just love everybody. And like everybody I look at is just so different. Even people that are angry or whatever, none of that has anything to do with me. So if I see somebody that looks like they're just like moping or just don't seem like they're very high vibration, I'll do my best to try to cheer them up. And a lot of it's just like pattern interrupts and just saying weird stuff that breaks them out of it, or being dressed in a weird way, or just doing something unique. And then you get them going, get them talking, and then ask them, what's your dreams? What do you want to do? And next thing you know, they're sharing what they want to do. And I'm like, well, what's stopping you from going now? And gets a lot of them really get the gears going. I never know who goes. I mean, only the ones that are close to me. But Yeah. And then the most strange part of it, the strangest part of the trip was I was in the mountains of New Mexico in a cabin. And every night I kept getting pulled out to come out in the woods, come out in the woods. And I would look out there and it's pitch black. And I would just like as a test to see what's out there. If I howled up into the air, I would get echoed from all kinds of directions, different animals. And the nearest neighbor is 6 miles out. The nearest store is like 70 miles. Nothing's close. You're middle of nowhere. And so I'm like, I'm not going out there at night. And unfortunately, it wasn't until the last day I was there, I get word that one of my buddies passed away at 44. And so that gave me a little kick in the ass to go out into the woods at night and see why am I being called out here. And I go for a walk and start walking through the trees. And then it gets to like the rangeland. And then I'm almost to this little meditation bench and I have a flashlight and I look over there and there's a coyote sitting next to the bench waiting for me. And it was just this, I can't even explain the experience, but ultimately it was some sort of Native American elder that was just telling me to accept myself as I am and stop trying to put projections of the world on me. And just, it was like a healing experience. For about 15 minutes, we just stared at each other. And the entire time my head's telling me, don't run, to stay calm. And it wasn't until after about that 15 minutes, I get like my head's telling me, okay, time to go. And then you have a pack of coyotes coming in looking for this one. And so this one goes his way, I go my way. And I get back to the cabin and a fear adrenaline rush because the coyotes were coming in around me. And I just felt like a new person after that. And every interaction I've had since then, it's just been no noise, no stress, just love and gratitude. And I keep meeting very interesting people. Like I met a guy that actually he goes around Detroit helping single dads, and helping other dads too. But he helps basically dads become better at fathering and learning to raise their children. And me and him hit it off, and we got talking and just ways of healing. And it's just been like, okay, interesting connections, a lot of serendipities, a lot of things just happen in ways that you can't explain. But yeah, I don't want to keep rambling too long.
Oh, I mean, that sounds like a very transformative experience. And I had a question because, sometimes like in my journey through self-help and therapy and all these things, I think intuition is sometimes a hard thing to follow because sometimes there's a lot of conflict with like advice and life paths. And you mentioned, I say this because you mentioned like getting this call to go into the forest where you had that
Yeah.
experience. And sometimes it's like, I'm not sure to trust my instincts or not, because sometimes, or intuition, sometimes it's been right, but sometimes it's led me astray. And I know there's like this quote, and obviously each quote is like you take with a grain of salt, but it's like instinct is a lie told by a fearful body hoping to be wrong or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious, like, how did you trust yourself to go into the forest, or like how did you experience that feeling? Like, I'm just trying to understand that a little bit more, even for my own sake.
Yeah. So the biggest trick for me, because I'm not the best at meditating, is I love float tanks, so like a flotation pod. And it became such a thing for me locally, where a lot of my friend circle now are the employees and the owners of the local float center. And they're also like very whimsical people. Like it takes not much to get them to put a costume on and go off into the world and be weird, and just an amazing place. But taking that time, you really start to get away from the technology, get away from all the noise, and you could sort of gauge. Like I've had times where my intuition tells me something that's totally false and it doesn't work, and like sometimes it's utterly ridiculous, so I'm like questioning it the whole time, and then I go and do whatever it's telling me to do, and it was just a flop. But it's just, I'd rather try stuff and have it be a flop than never try it at all and wonder if it would have worked. And that's something I've
That's a
really
good
had to run
attitude. Yeah.
into, because it's not easy to jump that first jump.
Mhm. No, 100%. I think there's just a lot of exploration that I'm still like self exploration. I'm still doing myself. I've been doing more like I'm talking a little bit more about myself also because a
Yeah,
few
go for it.
listeners have wanted me to incorporate my own thoughts into things. But I guess one of the things I'm working on is shadow work in therapy, which is like
Ooh,
we tend to there's a lot of things that we shame and stuff, and even just like feelings of sadness and stuff, you run into this issue where it's like, oh, I'm sad, I shouldn't be sad, and then that resistance just creates more tension and more conflict, rather than accepting this as part of the emotional spectrum, that it's okay to be sad or feel these other emotions, and kind of like, let yourself feel that as well and not resist. But sometimes that there is like a conflict there of like trying to resist or understanding, and there's still a lot of like ebbing and weaving, um, that I'm trying to figure out. Like a lot of feelings going in terms of dating and relationships. I know that there's like
mm.
obviously a mix of multitudes of anger and sadness and loneliness, but also not like trying not to push that away, because I think for so long I'd been resisting but really feeling into them. But it's very hard and it's very challenging.
Yeah, definitely. I've had a lot of troubles digging into some of this. It's taken some time. I'm not hesitant to ever try new and unusual therapies. And so one I just recently tried was bars therapy. And they lay you on you lay face up on a like a massage table, and they touch 32 different points around your head. And it takes about an hour, and you just talk, and it's just a normal conversation. And there were points where I would feel like one side of my head just feel like a burning, but then I would feel it release the energy. And it's from what I've been researching, and after discussing with the person that my practitioner that did this, it releases all the stuck energies from all these thoughts and all the conflict programming that we get in our world today. Because I mean, how many times do you watch an advertisement on the TV and you're like, there's no way in hell I'm going to buy this? And part of it is also because subconsciously you know that it's an actor. The person's never used the product, so whatever they're saying about it is all false. And so your subconscious is like, nope, don't trust this. But then your conscious mind, like, you just go back and forth. It's like it's a battle. And then you're like, oh, I need this product to be happy. And just it gets weird sometimes when you really ponder on it. But our society isn't designed to heal you, it's designed to make you think, oh, you need this product, you need this uh, whatever. Like, want the new iPhone. I love Apple products, but yeah, I mean,
Same,
yeah.
but in fairness, I'm a student who uses like a MacBook and then a phone to communicate. But I think in line to what you're saying, I think there is like a lot of shame that we do in advertising and stuff, and in terms of self-acceptance, like I feel like finally like making breakthroughs in accepting all parts of myself, like my masculine, my feminine parts, the athletic parts. I am also very much a nerd, but like embracing that. Like I love playing chess, I love learning about math, but I also have a lot of other interests, so I don't like to necessarily use just one label. But I
Yeah.
think a lot, like you said, of advertising is like dealing with inadequacies, that you are not enough as is, that you need this to be good. You need to smell good. So we're going to sell you the super fancy soap or deodorant, or you need this product and stuff. And obviously not very conducive, like you said, to a healthy society.
I mean, ultimately, if you believe in yourself enough, like especially women will detect it. They don't care what it is. It's your belief in it. If you feel shame about being a nerd, or you feel any bit of that, any shred of like doubt in yourself, a woman, the feminine, and the woman will pick that up, and instantly they know something's off. They don't necessarily know logically what's off, but they're like, something's up with this guy. Versus if you embrace everything of every weird quirk about you, you're like, that's cool, and something they never thought they would be into. And it just, I mean, I'm very big into human psychology too. I've done
Same.
so much reading, and I've read so many different books on the masculine and feminine, and similar shadow work. Like there's a like the shadow archetypes, like a shadow king is a
Mhm.
king that's ruling based off of power versus like having people respect them and actually ruling off of that. And it makes me think of another book I like called Power versus Force. And it talks about how much of the world, if they force you to do anything, it won't last. Versus if it's ultimate power, where someone believes in you and they know they can respect you and trust you, and they do something, it will last. because they know that you got their back, so to speak.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, and there's muscle testing, and I mean, you could go way down this rabbit hole, depending
Yeah.
on how you want to go. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs or anything is. It's all just energy, just different ways of interpreting the energy. So it's the same result. Like you could get the same thing that someone else gets out of like a meditation, or someone else gets it out of maybe some sort of religious practice. I don't know. It's not up to me to judge people on how they experience this world. I just like to learn about it and learn why people do what they do. It's sometimes really fascinating.
Yeah, and there really are all different types of people. Like you mentioned, like anywhere if you really take the time to learn the stories. But I mean, that's also part of the. I think that's like in terms of also like owning yourself. There's like 7 million people or 7 billion people, plus
Yeah.
some more than 7 billion people on the planet. It's like sometimes you need the. It's hard, but you got to have the courage to be you because the world needs that diversity.
And that's so many people are taught to conform. And I mean, our school system teaches you if you're either too smart or too dumb, or you're not the average, well, you're gonna have a hellish time throughout school. And I mean, I think we've all had classes where, oh, that class was too easy, I was bored the whole time, or that class was too hard, and but and just that's something else I would love to see change, because of like with AI and everything else, could we have some sort of computer program that helps train the kids in ways that fit their learning methods better?
Yeah, we do tend to have a one size fits all approach to education, which is not really how it works.
Yeah, it just the outliners get screwed. But
Yeah.
I was not a very good student. I was very bad about doing homework, and I would figure out which teachers only look at the first couple pages and only do the first couple pages. And
Yeah, it's more about gamesmanship than
yeah.
actual learning at that point.
And so now as an adult, I've learned on my own, my biggest hack of learning stuff is listening to like a focus beat or something like that, that someone has the brain beats or binaural beats. And you can sort of find one that's like a focus. And it's just like a very mild music you can listen to in some headphones. And next thing you know, you just read a book for 2 hours and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Have you ever experimented with that kind of stuff?
Not that specifically, but it is crazy how I think just with regular podcasts and you're driving and it's like it just flows sometimes. It's like you listen to an hour podcast and it doesn't feel like an hour. It just like felt very like just kind of just very flowy instead of like this very like rigid system of learning that sometimes happens in the public education or in any kind of education setting.
Yeah, it skips a lot of the stuff that you don't need. Like I always think of the Tim Ferriss podcast. We're like, 3 hours, there's no way I'm going to listen to this. And next thing you know, you're like, I listened to it and I want more.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss, interesting guy.
Who inspired you to start your podcast?
Okay, that's a good story. I think I mentioned this in another podcast, but essentially, I think kind of loosely similar to you, I like learning about other people and things like that. But what really inspired me is really someone else kind of did this similar style of podcast. I'm a big Toronto sports fan. And so during the pandemic, when there wasn't a lot of games and stuff, one of the sports writers and media persons that I like decided to do basically this concept of an idea where he talks to his friends about things they like. So he had friends that liked like WWE, like wrestling. He had a lot of, so this writer was, I believe, Hong Kong, Canadian. But so they had never seen a Bollywood movie before. So they decided to watch a Bollywood movie and talk to their Indian friends about it, like a very famous Bollywood movie that people knew.
Yeah.
And just things like that. And I was like, wait, this is fun. Like I don't have the following that they have, but why can't I just do this with my friends? And so at first it just started off with a couple friends that I knew talking about, I'd say not like super educational or insightful things, just banter about soccer or anything like that. And then it kind of grew, especially really thanks to Don or Sheldon. He goes by kind of both names. And he introduced me to so many people like yourself. And then I kind of reached out to more less like direct friends and more friends of friends. That way I would get like a broader perspective. And then all of a sudden, here I am talking to people who are getting their PhD in industrial design, people who are professional dancers, aerospace engineers. Like I got
Mhm.
all of the different types of people, and it's been fantastic. And I've learned a lot. And I was happy with just a couple episodes coming out, and then now we're on 30, and now it's like, well, let's just shoot for 100. It might take a couple
Yeah.
years, but why not? I'm learning a lot, and yeah, I actually get very surprised because I kind of just do this for myself, and I just put this on YouTube and know that it's not like, making millions of dollars. But occasionally I'll have friends and they'll like reference like listening to my podcast, and I'm like, wait, what? You actually listen to that? And
Mhm.
that's pretty cool when that happens.
I mean, everybody's got a message, and the hardest part is finding somebody to share it with.
Exactly.
And so I'm very honored that you approached me because I never
No,
thought
of
you were gonna
course. Of course, we haven't really delved into spirituality that much on the podcast. I think that's the general theme is sort of life discovery, life improvement, inspiration.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
talking
there's
to
so
you
many
is cool.
realms. Yeah, so many realms of information you could dig into. It's just fascinating, but I want to make sure it's something that can help your target audience too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about learning and learning about other people and the things that excite them. And I think we're definitely hit the check mark on that.
Yeah, I've taken like improv classes, or really got me to learn how to think on my feet. Like I thought I did before, but once you do a couple classes and do a few things on stage, it makes every job interview the most easy thing you could think of, because it's just you can improv your way out of anything.
Yeah, improv's great. I've done it a few times. I actually might go to one tonight, believe it or
Do
not.
it.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting one tomorrow night. It's a character and scene development class.
Ooh, okay.
Looking forward to that. But yeah, the job I have now, actually, during the interview process, and somehow I resulted in me telling them how I did trapeze and different circus arts and some of the improv stuff. And then they told me, well, we like you, but we can't, we don't have a position anymore. We found someone else. I'm like, okay, cool. And then 3 days later, they're like, actually, we made you a position. Can you come and work here?
Oh, what? That's insane.
That was how I got in there. And my day job is working for a power utility company. So
Nice.
I'm in
Actually,
IT.
I was gonna say one interesting thing that we could explore, just because honestly I don't know anyone else in my entire friend network that's done it. Is you said you were a referee for rollerblading, or not rollerblading,
Yeah,
but
roller derby.
roller derby. And I mean, I know what it is, but I've never met anyone that's done it or been a referee or just in that community. So if you want to talk
Yeah,
about that, that would be fun.
it's way more structured than people think. Ultimately, if you want to even skate in any capacity, you have to do, most boot camps are around 18 weeks, and it'll be twice a week, 2 to 3 hours of practice. And you learn the first while how to fall, how to move faster, how to get wheel speed, how to turn corners, and then eventually it progresses to, this is how you get hit. This is how you hit somebody
It
else.
seems super dangerous. Is it danger? I
It's,
guess what's the level of danger?
there is a level of danger. Like I mean, I can't say, there's been a couple times we've had to wait for an ambulance for somebody or something, but usually it's
In
like a
fairness,
lot.
Quidditch has had injuries as well.
Yeah,
So
usually it's someone that knows they probably shouldn't have gone out that day and they did it anyways. Like a lady had back surgery
okay,
and
well,
then
yeah,
went and did a game when she thought she was done healing.
yeah.
So ultimately it took her down pretty hard. And yeah, but ultimately, if you're a skater, you're not allowed to hit within the bra straps on either side of the body, is the mark, because it's usually women in that sport. And
And I was actually
that's the
curious
spot.
about that. Why is it like very um this is not the right word to use. So this is I'm not using this word because I think it's the right word, but why is it like catered to women, or why does it seems to be a sport very associated with women, which is great, but
Yeah.
there's nothing about it that seems inherently to me like it should be unique
So
to
there are
women.
men's leagues. It's just
Okay.
they're very few and far between. Like in my local area, we have one men's team and 25 women's teams. Like
Mhm.
it's not common. I think it's because most men go for other sports that don't require as much you don't have to train, you don't have to learn to skate, you don't have to learn all these different moves ahead of time in order to play. Because a lot of men's sports, I don't know how Quidditch or whatever works, but they can just throw you on a team and teach you as you're going.
I mean, that's what we do, but our team is kind of notorious is the wrong, or famous for like teaching new people. There's
Yeah.
a lot of internal Quidditch drama and stuff like that. Nothing major, but essentially a lot of the very competitive teams, it is actually like into leagues and stuff. So there are real competitions and real tournaments and real
Yeah.
games. A lot of the most competitive teams will basically just take the best players and then look for players that played in college. Whereas our focus, or at least one of our kind of values as a team, is we really try to recruit as many people as possible. So I think more than we're probably in the top 1% of teams that actually teach people Quidditch from scratch in
Okay.
terms of community teams. Like we will just, and this is not a joke, we will literally just talk to anyone off the street and be like, hey, have you ever tried Quidditch? And give them like business cards and have people join. And a lot of times people will just come from a couple practices and it'll not be for them. But at the same time, like we've done that with more people than like almost any other team out our major in the entire US Quidditch community. And I am very proud of that because we can take people that had never played before and give them that experience as opposed to just being a very closed off group.
Yeah. In the derby community, there's a lot of precautions that are taken, like the pads that you wear, you can fall from quite a height with no effort at all. Like there's drills that we would do, you fall to your knees, like fall to your knees, get back up, fall to your knees, get back up, where it becomes muscle memory. So when you do go down, you're already back up before you even knew you fell. Like it's just interesting because like these pads are, like, you won't see in the video, but they're huge. It's like
Yeah, I'd
the rope is
imagine.
always like, it's like the size of a kitten. But yeah, there's a lot of rules against hitting certain spots of the body and a lot of safety precautions. And like you can do whips, but that's more of like you'd grab someone's arm and you'd give them all your power, momentum, and send them forwards. But you have to train and practice that, because if you do it wrong, you're going to hurt each other.
Mhm.
And that's something I've done a little bit with just playing with friends at the tennis courts here when we're skating. I'll do that kind of stuff, but
Nice.
nothing like I used to, because the referees have to go through the same boot camp. You have to get hit.
Oh,
You have
wow.
to learn to hit. You
Well,
have
that
to
makes
learn
sense. You have to know what they're
jam.
going through.
Yeah, you have to know all of it. And the nice thing about that community is it doesn't matter if you're tiny or big, because each body type has an advantage, or if you're somewhere in between. Like it just was fascinating because you would watch all these different people just come together and work together. And our league, actually, when I was in it, we went from being like in the 60th space internationally ranked to like in the top 5.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really cool to see. And a lot of it was just people were getting rid of excuses and just having a good time, but they were taking care of each other. And you get sort of like that hive mind like you do when you're doing improv, where you all start to think the same, and it just becomes like a flow, and it's really fascinating. But as a referee, you typically have, I want to say, 7 referees at a game. One of them sitting on the sidelines with a black shirt on, and the rest are all out on the different sides of the pack. And each jammer has a referee dedicated to them. Then there's one for the middle of the pack, one for the back and the sides. And you have to communicate. There's hand singles. There's all kinds of different things to really, like, I'm trying to remember it all. It's been a bit, but ultimately that ref that's in the black sitting on the side, if they see a ref go down because they got hit or whatever, and they're not getting back up, they have to get up and jump in and take over. And it's just fascinating because not many sports have that many referees at a time.
Yeah. I can see a lot of moving pieces. Quidditch actually has a good amount of referees as well, because there's also a lot of different kind of pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. And then you got to learn to skate. You got to learn, keep your speed. Because depending on what kind of skating you want to do, like you might go backwards the whole way through if you know it's a slower pack. Like we had a recreation league, and that was some of the people that just, they don't want to get hit. They want to do, so it's like flag football. You just tag each other, and it's way less pain. And then there's others that want all the hitting and they don't care. And so depending what you're reffing, you can either skate leisurely or you're going to skate balls to the wall the whole time and wonder how you're standing afterwards. And ultimately, it was just really eye-opening just to see people come together. You'd see patterns repeat in different leagues. Like we would play leagues from different states, and that person's just like this person I know. Like it's the same people, but in very different forms. It was just so fascinating to see humans in that capacity. And but the boot camp, you have to pass a skills test, and so it took me
Wow.
2 tries to get through my skills test because I had
They're
no
really diligent about this
yeah.
preparation, which is good.
And the funny part was there was 3 of us that took us 3 boot camps. Was it 3? It was 3, I think, 2 or 3. But yeah, it took us multiple boot camps to get through it, and it brought us all really close together. And the buddy that passed away, he was actually one of the referees I trained with, and a former coworker. And it was when I heard about my trip and everything. And so I had to reach out to people from earlier we haven't talked to in years, and it was just like instant best friends because we've been through hell together.
Damn.
And yeah, you just learn to encourage each other, and a lot of that overlaps. Like in the circus community, there's a lot of encouragement. Like one of the friends I made there, she was about to get on trapeze, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's gonna be really hard." And I'm like, "Whoa, you're doing it wrong. Get back down." She's like, "What?" I'm like, "First, you got to say something different to yourself, and this is gonna be really hard." And so then she's like, "Okay, this is gonna be easy," or something like simple, just a couple words changing, and then she was able to accomplish the move, and it was a new move to her, and it was just so nice to see.
Nice.
And a lot of support, and they're just same thing in the unicycle class. The unicycle class is the biggest melting pot I've ever been in now. We have all ages. We have grandparents skating with their kids. Their grandkids.
That is insane. In a good
way. Not skating, unicycling.
Unicycle.
And there's people that can play basketball in unicycle. They can hockey in unicycle. They can ballroom dance. And this is all stuff I'm dreaming of doing one day. But for me, it's all about reprogramming your brain, because as soon as you start to think too much, you usually fall off.
Oh yeah, as someone who overthinks all the time, I can relate.
And yeah, and so this last Saturday, we go through the practice, and I'm finally getting to the point where I can unicycle around the gym, and not really a problem, but it's just staying up for more than a couple laps. I'm usually go down. And there's this other kid that's probably like 12 or 13 that he's learning to do cones. And so me and him are going back and forth trying to zigzag through cones. And there's this guy in his 50s he's trying to learn the jump and this and that. And so we're all learning. And then at the end of class, the instructor announces that she needs the 3 of us to come up, and we're all looking at each other like, what did we do wrong? We're in trouble. And she's like, you guys are riding with the troop today. And we got to do a warm up with the people that do this all the time.
Oh, wow.
And I love it because it's structured. Like there's level 0, level 1 to 10. And so you can see where you're at on that scale and see where the next steps are, instead of just having chaos.
Oh, that's great.
On your own.
How do you find out about all this cool stuff?
That one was so way back when I left the law firm, my first hobby there after that was I was garage sailing, and I thought tax sale meant farmer talk for garage sale. It means like horse clothing and stuff. And I got talking to the lady there, and she's like, I'm looking for a photographer, and something just told me you should do this. It would be fun to meet some people. And I said, sure, I can do photography. Like both my parents are photographers. I just haven't touched a camera in years. In my head is what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
well, I can do this. And so she's like, great, meet me at this parade. And it's like a couple hours from here. And so I go home, buy a camera because I didn't have a camera, and I go up to the parade and got to meet the people. And at that point, I wanted nothing to do with the horses. I just wanted something different. And then eventually I slowly got coaxed into riding a horse. And like one of the first teachers was this girl that was like, I think she was 6 or 7.
Oh,
like,
wow.
super young, but she's been riding since she was 4. So she knew the basics, and she could explain it to you in such layman terms. It was just like, okay, maybe she was 8, but whatever. She was super young, where I'm just like, wow, this is weird, but okay. You're teaching me how to ride a horse. And then the other girls that were in their 20s came over, and they were watching to make sure everything was legit. But they got me to ride a horse, and I got to ride in a parade and push those comfort zones, and lots of comfort zone pushing. And I never realized that some people don't do this.
Yeah.
Like just all I want to do is inspire people because they're all capable of so much more than they believe.
Yeah, that sounds very cool.
Yeah, what else I was doing at the time? Because I was used to working at a law firm nonstop. I
Mhm.
had so much free time, and at first I fell down the, go buy an Xbox and I'll play video games, and it's like, okay, I'm not even enjoying this. Like, I'd rather be outside. It's nice out
Yeah.
or whatever. And so eventually, that's when I got into doing the horses. But then I was gonna do. I went down to I was looking at the city I was living in at the time, and I'm like, what do you guys do for like city volunteers? And they had a program called CERT, which is very common in California, but
Mhm.
it's the Community Emergency Response Team. And so basically, the fire department trains you as like a backup to the backups, and you do special events and like in disaster areas, like would be utilized. But for the most part, we were mainly used for search and rescue. Like someone went missing in the woods, we would go off and do a search line. And some of the trainings for that are way worse than you think. Like the instructor walks up with a roll of quarters and throws them in a football field, and you get to find them, see them
Wow.
fine, because you have to stay in a tight pattern. And you got to
Yeah.
check the ground, and I mean it's a great way of learning it, but you get to learn how to get around terrain that you can't move, like a big tree or a rock or something or a mountain. And ultimately, I only did a couple of legit searches. The rest were just special events and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's a weird feeling because you go out there and you're like, okay, we're going to be people that find this person. And then when you only find maybe a couple clues, it's sad, but
Mhm.
it's part of, at least I tried something instead of sitting at home watching this on the news.
At least you tried. Yeah. Better than nothing.
Yeah. And that slowly resulted in the city I was in most recently. I was one of their auxiliary police people. So we're not actually legally police officers, but you're dressed up pretty much close to one. Your color, your shirt is different, and the gear that you carry is different. I think I told you a little bit about this,
Hmm.
and that was just a very eye-opening way to be a part of the community. Just there is a point it gets a little more dangerous than you want it to be because
Sure.
people put a lot of projections on law
Yeah.
enforcement,
Yeah.
and most of the officers I met were just stupendous people that you're glad they're doing what they're doing. And I never had a problem meeting anybody nasty, but people always complain about it, and I was like, I don't know. But yeah, that was a big eye opener. We really got to feel a part of the community, and it was just really cool. I mean, you saw so much that you never knew happened, good and bad, and sometimes it was rough days, but you had those days where like you found someone's dog or whatever.
And that, yeah, that's I feel like those kind of like opportunities just make you feel so good. Like for me, I obviously don't have experience with that, but
Yeah.
just doing like IT work, like when someone's freaking out about their computer and then you fix it, it's like I remember this semester, I'm a grad student, like there was this, and I come from a tech background, so for
Okay.
context, so there was this fellow colleague of mine, she's in a program and she's trying to just do research through her school's databases, like USC's databases, and it's not working. And it's so weird. Like I do all the normal things, like are we connected to Wi-Fi? Is there like a permissions issue? And I'm like, what is happening? And apparently she even took her laptop to like libraries IT and they couldn't figure it out. So
Yeah.
then I had to go outside the box and think of like things that I probably wouldn't have thought of if I didn't work in tech, of like, okay, let's see if there's some sort of link proxy issue. And apparently her like routing system was linking to UCLA. She was an undergrad at UCLA. And so I had to just clear that out and then it worked. And she was just so thankful. And I was like, and the tech people even couldn't figure it out at USC. And that made me feel just so good. Just like when you
Yeah,
can make someone's
definitely.
day. Yeah.
That's I've done a lot of years of IT, and when you were they nicknamed me Johnny on the spot when I worked in a manufacturing plant because they would just page you over the over speaker and you'd go out there, and usually it was something simple, but
Yeah.
sometimes it was more in depth. And like one of them was the operating system was upgraded from Windows 3.1 to 95 to NT, from NT to XP to 2000, and I think it stopped at 2000. Maybe it was XP first, but ultimately there was some settings that were set up in Windows 3.1, And
Mhm.
somehow this machine got upgraded that many times, those settings actually carried over and it was blocking access to a bunch of stuff.
Yep. It's
It
it's
was
small
like,
things like that. Yeah.
yeah, I can't even tell you. I think it was the win.com or something. It was like some file that's archaic and I don't even know it because he was a
Win.exe.
kid.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. And what was the first computer you actually used since you worked in
uh,
IT?
my parents were very late to the game. To say how late we are, we got a Vista computer, right? Like that's
Really?
how. So I had to deal with that, and then before I was in grad school, I was working with like Linux and stuff. So I've kind of dealt with the whole spectrum of computers, from going from like having nothing to like some very crazy computer technology.
Yeah, no, it's so fascinating. I started off with an 8 megahertz 386. So funny how times have changed. The hard drive was 40 megs. Now I didn't
Hey,
last anything.
that's insane. Yeah, it's a new world. But yeah, just making someone's day. And I was curious if you had any advice of how to do that at like a much smaller scale. Like this required a problem, like by definition with police, or in this situation, it requires a problem to give a solution. But I know you mentioned the costumes thing, but let's say you're just an ordinary person walking around. What are like simple ways you found that have just like brightened someone's day?
I mean, the simplest ones for me is I've had mornings where I'll go for a walk and I see how I have my record of how many people can I say hi to in the morning and how many will say hi back. And
Mhm.
some mornings it's 10 for 10, some it's I might talk to 20 people and just say hi, and some I see three. Like you just never know. But sometimes just saying hello reminds somebody they're part of a community. And that's one of my simple ones. But my biggest one is whenever I see a cashier that just looks like they're done with the world or just had a rough day, I try to find some way in. And so I guess my most recent example is, which you guys probably don't even have these stores, but we went to a Tractor Supply
Hmm.
store, and my girlfriend's a gardener, so she wanted to look at some stuff there. And I'm just sort of like, yeah, I don't really need anything from here at this point of life, but maybe
Sure.
one day. And so the cashier is talking to her, and I'm like, how long has your guys' store been here? And she's like, oh yeah, we've been here like 9 months or something like that. I'm like,
Oh,
okay, I don't
it's
remember
new.
being here
Yeah.
before. And so I asked a little bit about that. And then what did I ask her? I asked her something totally ridiculous. I'm like, do you guys sell farms? And she's laughs because she's like, no. I'm like, okay, then I'm not ready for anything yet. And I'm like, if my girlfriend doesn't make it up to the register by the time you guys close, does that mean you guys are going to take her in as an employee? And she's like, actually, we need people, so sure. And so like
Oh
just
wow.
going
Yeah,
back and
just the
forth, joking
banter.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, just having a little banter, and you don't know how much that goes to someone's day. And I mean, to my local grocery store here, it's to the point where I banter with majority of the staff. I at least get head nods and walk in, and even if they're having a busy day, I'll usually smile and make a funny face when I'm walking by the crazy line to go get my stuff because they need that break up in the day. And then I'll usually try to talk to them when I can, but sometimes you can't.
Mhm.
But I go there different times of the day because, yeah, if you can go in the morning or go in the weird hours when no one else is there, and it tends to help. But
Yeah.
and
For
that's, I
sure.
mean, the same thing when I used to live in an area with bars and I used to go to the bar more. I knew all the people at the bar. I would go there at the bar open at 4, and I would go at 4. And it was because I knew there's all these older dudes that live in the senior center next door, and they would be up there. And so we would get in the discussions about life and philosophy and talk concepts. And I don't even know how this originally started, but it became a regular thing on Monday nights. Like I'd get up there around 4 and I'd be there till like 9 or 10 talking to these guys. Cause as soon as they leave, the next one that comes in was a guy that owned a cybersecurity company.
Mhm.
And so we'd get talking about that stuff. And there was some other guy who was a music producer. And just, I would ask people there, like, I wouldn't ask them like, you don't want to ask them what do you do, you want to ask them something different. So like what makes you
Yeah.
tick is one of my favorite ones to
What
ask.
makes you what? Sorry.
What makes you tick?
What makes you tick?
And that could be interpreted any way they want, and so you can sort of gauge when they answer. If they only want to talk about work, okay, you're probably not somebody for me.
Mhm.
But then if you want to talk about other things that make you excited, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
And it's just been fun. I mean, I've befriended so many bartenders over the years, and like we would go to estate sales. I hit them up before they go to work at like 4 in the afternoon or whatever, and I would like drop them off at the bar. I'm like, I'll see you guys. Like, I don't know when I'll be in there next, but it was so much fun because you get to see and realize that, remember, everybody around you is a human too. Like,
True.
we're all in it together. We're all very similar needs and wants. And until you talk to people, you don't realize how alike we all are. It doesn't matter what you look like or anything else about you. We're all very similar. And
Very
not to
true.
get political, but like what's going on over in Ukraine and stuff, it's just like all you can do is send compassion, because what else
Yep.
can you do?
Yep.
And ultimately, there's so much going on that we probably don't even see or hear. But what can you do but send love? And I do that a lot. I'll send, like, if I see a car accident, I'll just envision myself sending light and energy to those people involved, even if it's minor, because just trauma and stress. And
Sure.
when I did police stuff, there was a couple that we went on that were just, you would see what an entitled person would want. And not really, I'm not supposed to go too deep. I won't do names or anything, but there was an accident where the family had to go get rushed to the hospital, and you could tell the parents are barely breathing and the kids are very concerned, and it's just entire shit show. And this guy is complaining that they're not helping him fast enough, and I'm like, dude, you have a sprained ankle. Like, you're standing here talking and you just leaned against the car, like, you're fine. And he's like, I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you didn't see what just left, did you? And he's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you have a mom and dad that are struggling for breath, and it sounds like a lung has collapsed and their kids are with them. He's like, oh, like, he realizes how ridiculous, how he had no idea what else was going on around him. And it's how much of everything is just situational awareness. Like, the whole Born Identity franchise is just a guy that's aware of his surroundings and has the stamina to deal with everything he's going to come up with. And how any of us could really do that if you really have the discipline. Like,
Yeah.
just being aware of everything around you is so powerful.
Awareness, sure.
And talking to people, like, that's how I got to know the vendors at the market. And one of them even remembered me from years ago when I used to just go there on Saturday mornings, and I would just ask people, how'd your day going? And did you have any crazies today? I can be your crazy today. And they would laugh usually. Sometimes you get nothing, but they don't laugh, and I don't need to talk to them. Like, it's as simple as that. And or if I see a trainee at a store, I'll typically be like, okay, I'll look at the person that's training them. Do you want me to, like, have a tantrum or do something crazy and get them both to smile and then act like I'm the worst person ever to them, but not really, and just, well, get them laughing, because nothing should be taken too seriously. I mean, we don't get out of this experience of life alive, so don't stress yourself out too much. But at the same time, you got to respect, like, if you're a cashier, you still have to be able to do the job. There's times you have to play the games and do the life, and it's like a balance. And that's something I sometimes struggle with too, because it's so much fun to play all the time, but you got to balance it.
For sure.
Make sure you're giving back to the world, so you can, I mean, the world is, you give it stuff, it gives you back double typically. So give good stuff.
For sure. If you don't mind, I was wondering if we could go into some personal territory, and you obviously don't have to answer, but I'm curious what the lessons you've picked, because talked about this a little bit last time, what the lessons you've learned with dating and that dynamic has been over time.
Yeah. Oh, that's been a wild ride. So dating wise,
and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to.
I'll talk about it for a bit. Yeah. Dating wise, I started off as like the nice guy. I was doing all these nice things to women to make them like me, and wondering why that wasn't working. And ultimately, I found a author called Dr. Glover, who writes a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. I read that, and it's like, this is me. But I was like mad at the book, because it was my whole paradigm of life.
Sure.
Is told that this is inappropriate. And so then a friend told me to read David Data in the Way of the Superior Man. And I read it and I just get mad. I'm like, this book's dumb. It's telling me that there's a point where you have to lead a woman, and that's not giving her a choice, blah, blah, blah. And going back and forth. It's like, okay. Like, I got really mad at it. And then I realized that over time, after a lot of working through this in therapy and floats and just doing all these different means and reading books, is there is a point where a woman would like to be led so they can relax into their feminine, and you can relax into your masculine, and then the energies can have the polarity where they are attracted to each other. And that was something that I typically in past relationships never had, that polarity. Like, there was not that intense spark. It was just like, oh yeah, we're great, we hang out, we have a good time and whatever. But when you get a polarity going where you can just lead people on a trip or adventure or whatever, it's so much, it feels good for both sides in my opinion. And it's something I really struggle with because I grew up in the like a feminist world, and it goes against what some of that says. But then as I do more and more work, the feminists aren't mad at masculine people, they're mad at the shadow masculine people, the ones that are doing stuff that they haven't really earned. So they're like a boy pretending to be a man.
Mm.
And so they're ruling in a way that's inappropriate. Like the prime example would be a therapist that you're working with, and your therapist, you start to tell them how happy and excited you are, and they're like, whoa, 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 we got to get you down to normal, which is like a gray zone.
Mhm.
That shouldn't be any therapist, but this one's doing it because that's the world that they perceive. And so they want to put you back into that world. So you live in you're just not a menace to anything, and you're not really making any changes. And so it's just something I still ponder on a lot. I've read so many different books and I've learned so much. And my prime example is my girlfriend and one of her friends flew into Vegas recently when I was on my road trip. I met them there. And I had it all figured out from when they would land, and I'd go pick them up and take them to the hotel, and just I would lead them throughout the city, and they both enjoyed it. And they're both women that normally it's not easy to lead them, but it was just, it let them both relax, let me relax. And I've never really understood the differences in energies until recently. And that's been a big win, is not all tension is bad. Like sometimes you need to let some tension build up. A woman typically wants a little bit of tension. And there's a couple other classes that they offer, but it's on emotional tension. And so like if a woman's picking fights with you like that, you've been in a relationship for a while and you're like, why is she doing this doesn't make sense. She's looking for some sort of tension to have in between the two of you for to dissipate and come out in different, like typically it's romantic forms. And it's one of those, I was always taught as a kid, oh, tension's bad, diffuse it all at all costs, don't let any tension build up. And now I'm learning some tension is good. I mean, some's still going to be bad, but you have to like experiment and learn life and live life to really figure out what works. Because if you sit there and try to read it on the internet and learn it from the internet, you're not accomplishing anything. Just get out and try stuff and see what happens from your own personal experience. And I don't know if that's too vague, if you need more information, but
well, I mean, I think things are kind of vague for a reason, because I think, like you said, there's sort of individual experiences everyone has, and everyone can kind of operate very different, because people are still different in terms of every man and every woman, and especially people who don't fall on this
yeah,
binary spectrum of like where their balance of masculine and feminine energy is. But I do kind of, I know this year has been a lot of reincorporate, as someone who also maybe falls into this nice guy trap, reincorporating some more of that masculine energy, because I feel like I have both of those types of energies, but allowing myself in healthy ways. Like I've picked up boxing this year, and that's been very helpful, and learning more to stand up for myself. But that also gives me the grace to like also embrace enjoying the nerdy parts of myself, and enjoying the more, I guess, quote unquote, softer parts of myself, not in a way that makes me a pushover, and like I still want to stand up for what I believe and who I am, but at the same time, like I still want to also be nice in the sense of helping other people when I can and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of the biggest thing I always had to remind myself many times was you have both masculine and feminine in you. Like neither one, it just, you have to balance it right. And then sometimes it gets too skewed, but it's never bad to have them both, because if you have too much of one, that's not good either. And it was something I learned in the roller derby community. There's a lot of LGBT people, and in their relationships, it's pretty easy to pick out which one's the masculine, which one's the feminine.
Yeah.
It was just, I don't know why straight people don't learn this, because it was just like, okay, you would see, okay, that one's who you go to if you want to ask for the two of them to come somewhere or whatever. You'd learn pretty quick. And it was just fascinating life advice that I don't think anybody was intending to give me, but I picked it up by just observations. And I used to just be chaos. It'd be like go off on an adventure, but there was no rhyme or reason to it. And now my adventures can be as simple as like so my girlfriend doesn't really drink much. And so last Saturday we're sitting here and we're trying to figure out what we're gonna do for the evening. And she's coming up with ideas and I suggest a movie and we're both like, nah, I'm not really into it. I'm like, okay, we'll get your coat on. We're going for ice cream. And so we go to an ice cream place where they take liquid nitrogen and they make the ice cream in front of you, like real time.
Oh, is that the one where they put it into rolls, or am I thinking?
Just that I like that one. We do have one of those, but yeah, this one's called Milkster.
Okay.
So it's a little different, but that one's a good one too. But it was different. She'd never been there. And so we just go and have a nice ice cream. And afterwards, we're like, okay, well, what now? And there's a couple department stores over there. And we don't typically do that kind of thing. Like most of the stuff I buy is from thrifts and whatever. And so we walk into Dick's Sporting Goods and look around. And we're just sort of like, okay, getting ideas for the van, getting ideas for all this, like whatever else we're going to do for summer travels. And then next door, they opened up one of those Total Wines to giant liquor stores that's like massive. And I was like, for fun, let's go check it out because there's a bunch of hype. And so we go in there and we're both laughing because we're like, I never would go into a liquor store with you, but we're not trying. We started making it where what else is possible is one of my mantras for life. And so whenever you're like, I don't know, what else is possible? What else is possible? And so we walked through there and we made a little 6-pack and we have barely tried some sake and stuff, but we didn't really do much with it, but it was just something way different than we could have imagined. And then that was another one. The people in line in front of us were they were a little bantery. I got them going even more. I don't even know what I said to them. And then we're making jokes and going back and forth, including the cashier and the person behind us in line. And we're just all having a good time. And when they leave, they wish us a good evening. And the cashier's super bantery and having a good time now. And then the person behind us jumps in the conversation. And then we leave there. We're like, I feel great. Like, I don't know. But
Nice.
it's just never expected to go in there and buy some stuff, but whatever. I don't want to shut down any possibilities in this world anymore because anything is possible. And I know it's sort of a weird one, but it was just, I had the lead the whole night where I just kept picking destinations of where we're going next. And it's been great for both of us because we're just both able to just relax into it. And it's made the relationship go to different levels than I never expected to go in a relationship.
Nice.
I'm trying to think what else, but yeah, that's the big one I can think of. I'm still working on. I mean, there's always life to learn, but currently I'm working on becoming some sort of speaker. I wanted to be a motivational speaker before COVID, and then COVID shut me down after my first speech, like a week after.
You did it from Toastmasters, right?
Yeah, and so I started doing Toastmasters, and my work actually has a chapter, and it's been a lot of fun. It's just a good way to help yourself grow and really watch what you're saying. Like I'm sure when I listen to this later, I'll find all my filler words that you don't realize that you say aloud, and then work on bettering myself.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think public speaking is something that a lot of people are afraid of, but a very useful skill. I did speech and debate in high school and college, and that's been very helpful even to this day. I mean, I sort of still do debate occasionally at grad school, so it's not like completely gone from my life, but definitely a useful skill for sure.
Yeah. And I was the quiet kid in school. I was in speech therapy because I could barely tell you a sentence. And so people don't believe me anymore. And I'm like, much of that was probably patterns that were stuck and conflicting in my brain. And I just cleared them through taking that time to dig in, get away from all the noise of the computer games and the distractions and let whatever wants out. Now it just feels so different.
Yeah,
Everything in the world is just love and gratitude.
for sure. I think like we've kind of like talked about a lot of good stuff. I think I learned a lot, and I'm excited to just take that. I think what I will take away most from any of this is just like, well, I guess there's two things. One is, like you said, the key philosophy of trying to make people's day a little bit better. and being more aware and trying silly stuff and more banter. I think that's something I've been wanting to incorporate. And I think this is just an inspiration to just
Yeah.
kind of continue that going forward. And then two, I've been trying more of that subconscious exercise, like you said, like what's possible, and just like allowing myself to ask questions like that in the back of my head to kind of see larger possibilities than what might seem apparent at first glance.
Another one I like to say when I'm stuck on something at work is some way, somehow I'll get through this, or I'll figure out how to fix this. And the next thing you know, the idea just pops in your head.
Okay, I'm going to take that as well, if you
Yeah,
don't
that's
mind.
a good one. And then I said one last tidbit I wanted to share was
Sure.
reminding people to slow down when they go about their day. Because if you just run in and grab your coffee and leave right away, you have no chance to interact with anybody there. And especially if you're in a dating capacity, you could meet somebody at a coffee shop for in that little 30-second transaction, or you could just meet people that, like, for me, the nearest coffee shop is Starbucks, but it's like a community place. Like, you go there in the morning, it's the same workmen that are getting ready for their day and they're planning out their routes, and then it's the same couple of people from the senior center over here, and then there's a couple of families, and it's just, depending what time you go, it's the same people almost every Monday at that same time, and it's sort of fun, but you get to at least recognize faces.
And that's something, as someone who has a lot of anxiety, that's something I'm working on more, just through mindfulness and stuff, going back to awareness, focusing on breath, but still allowing emotions and stuff to come through. Like, that's something I really want to try to incorporate more as well, is the slowing down part.
Yeah, I like it. That's awesome. I appreciate your time, and this has been a lot of fun. And
No, likewise. I'm so excited. I will definitely send you a link, and I hope to still like chat with you and
yeah,
text with you
definitely.
otherwise regularly.
I do have a guy I'll put you in touch with at some point here too, because he runs a bunch of men's groups, and I think you guys would click.
Yeah, looking forward to talking and connecting with any and all people.
So definitely. And I hope you have a great day. And I'm just so excited to finally have a podcast interview.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, Alex.
Take care.